Welcome to the Frontline Herbalism podcast with your host Nicole Rose from the Solidarity Apothecary. This is your place for all things plants and liberation. Let's get started. Hello again, second little episode this week. I thought I would do a separate episode talking about the new course I'm launching. It's called the Herbalism PTSD, which stands for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, and Traumatic Stress course. It's something I've been working on for a really, really long time. I was hoping to launch it last year, but due to the death of my close friend Taylor, everything kind of went by the wayside. But I'm very grateful that I've been able to work much more consistently recently, and finally felt able to be like, oh, hey world, I'm doing this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the course page, and then I'm just going to kind of like ad-lib with little extras about what you can expect. But before I do that, maybe you heard on the last episode, I'm now an official member of the Channel Zero network, which is like a network of anarchist kind of podcasters, radio shows, media makers. And as part of that, and like solidarity with each other's shows, we play a little jingle. And I'm still finding this exciting and novel. So here is a jingle from another show.
KiteLine is a weekly 30-minute radio program focusing on issues in the prison system. You'll hear news along with stories from prisoners and former prisoners as well as their loved ones. You'll learn what prison is, how it functions, and how it impacts all of us.
Behind the prison walls, a message is called a kite. Whispered words, a note passed hand to hand, a request submitted to the guards for medical care. Illicit or not, sending a kite means trusting that other people will bear it farther along until it reaches its destination. Here on KiteLine, we hope to share these words across the prison walls.
You can hear us on the Channel Zero network and find out more at kitelineradio.noblogs.org.
How cool was that? I have to make my own jingle soon and share it with them. Anyway, so I'm going to be talking about the course, and I just want to invite anyone to email me with any questions if things aren't clear, and to check out the page itself because it's really pretty. It's got lots of beautiful pictures of roses and other herbs that we'll talk about in the course. Obviously in true Nicole style, it's lots of pink and black, so check it out. Okay, so the Herbalism, PTSD and Traumatic Stress course. In a world full of injustice and oppression that can be deeply traumatizing, we need plant medicines more than ever. In this self-paced online course, you will be supported to build relationships with plants to help take care of your nervous system, your health, and your loved ones for the long haul. The course will help you gain an understanding of how trauma shapes the body and how we can reclaim and reshape it. You'll also develop an in-depth knowledge of plants and nervous system physiology grounded in an anti-oppressive analysis. This course will not only help you learn the theory, but most importantly, it will aid you in embodying the practice. The course is structured and has resources to enable you to gain the practical herbalism skills you need to transform your life and find some respite from the relentless rollercoaster of post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic stress. And we, in the course, we really interrogate this concept of like PTSD and this word disorder and if it's appropriate and stuff. But I just use it because I think people know what it is, like it's something that people will see and they'll kind of understand, or they'll have like cultural reference to it, if that makes sense. And then in the course we can kind of like dismantle some of those ideas. So it is open for enrollment at the end of February, and a little text saying the course is open for enrollment from the end of February to early March 2023. I haven't set an official launch date. I'm trying to be compassionate with myself of finishing the course in a kind of sustainable fashion. And I'm doing my best. I always wildly underestimate how long things take, but I think I'm getting there, and I'm kind of on track with my work plan to launch at the end of February, but I will obviously keep people posted. And then I think it's going to kind of be open maybe up until the second week of March or something. The reason I'm doing it like this and not just having it open all year round is because I, as you know, if you follow my work or my Instagram or whatever, but I'm kind of all over the place really. I'm working in Calais, I'm working in Poland, I'm doing a clinic in England, I'm doing solidarity work, I'm doing prison visits. I'm not always present to be able to answer people's questions, or if someone can't access a website or having an issue, I need to be available, if that makes sense. So I've set aside March to be focused. I think I will hopefully be going to Calais if we raise enough money, but I set aside that time to be available to people. And then, maybe I'll open it up in the summer or the autumn or something, like depending on how many people sign up. But yeah, okay. And it's sliding scale pricing. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but basically like no one is turned away for lack of funds. So I don't want you to listen to this and be like, that sounds amazing, I can never afford it, because like, yeah, I've really fucking been there, like financially, and I'll talk about that stuff a little bit later. But I just want to say, like, please hang in there and listen to this and see that, I am like genuinely not turning people away if they can't afford it. Okay, and self-paced learning. So complete at your own pace for as long as you need, lifetime access. And then there's a stunning picture of lemon balm from a garden, and there's a little bit more course information. Okay, so plants take care of us when our bodies express the distress we feel. PTSD can be unrelenting and unforgiving. Unlike common trauma narratives, what we're going through isn't always in the past. It's not always historic experiences remaining unprocessed in our bodies. Traumatic stress can be ongoing and be very much in the present. And unfortunately, it is often a big, exhausting mix of both, past and present. Whatever we've gone through or are going through, our bodies express distress in different ways. Anxiety, panic attacks, nightmares, flashbacks, insomnia, bouts of anger and rage, digestive issues, headaches, regular coughs, colds, infections, chronic inflammation, muscle pain, and more. Plant medicines can support us to manage and recover from many of these symptoms to help us find steady ground in what can often feel like a world of chaos. Plants take care of us when we struggle to trust humans. For people who've had their trust in humans shattered, the more than human world offers relationships of love, connection, and stability that can help people survive what they should have never had to endure. Plants can teach us new ways of being in our bodies and help us move into a more parasympathetic nervous system state, aka rest and digest. And we like dive heavily into that language and biology around the nervous system. So like if there's words on this page that you're like, I have no idea what that means, don't worry, like we go into that. Feeling different is bigger than ingesting a herb through a tincture or tea. It is the act of herbalism itself, being outside, growing plants, foraging, medicine making, etc. that heals us. This course introduces these practical skills so that you can form a rich relationship with the world around you and feel supported. With plants, you are never alone. Plants take care of us over the long haul as we survive what is fucked up in the world and transform it together. The world isn't likely to become less traumatizing anytime soon. Equipping ourselves with the skills to take care of ourselves and each other is essential. Herbalism is a lifelong journey. Plant medicines can transform your life by enabling a deeper relationship with the land, improving sleep and digestion, preventing disease, reducing inflammation, and aiding the nervous system to rest and recover while surviving and resisting this oppressive world. This course teaches you the principles and frameworks on which herbs to choose and why for your unique constitution, health, history, and needs. It encourages experimentation for you to work with different plants and see which work for you better than others. Our goal is for you to be able to build a medicine cabinet of allies that can support you negotiating and navigating a lifetime of experiences. And there's a gorgeous picture of roses in my garden. And now I kind of go through like module by module. So what's inside the Herbalism, PTSD and Traumatic Stress course? Module 1. What is trauma? This module explores the question, what is trauma? We look at the reductionist ways trauma is commonly framed, that it's a result of faulty brain chemistry, that we are sick, insane, or mad, quote unquote. We explore trauma as forces of the world around us that shape us, from racism to ecological destruction. We dive into common trauma dynamics such as lack of safety and support, powerlessness, and dysregulation. And again, that's like geeky trauma language, which we'll talk about more, and also kind of dismantle. So some of the lessons in this module include what is trauma, like how is trauma framed in the global north, exploring liberating ways of framing trauma and common trauma dynamics. This module kind of like sets the scene for the whole course of like how we talk about trauma in like an inherently political way and in a way that like aspires to be liberating and not kind of like neutral, if that makes sense. Not like, oh, there's a scientific theory, but more just like, how does capitalism affect us? How does racism affect people? Like how how does patriarchy affect our bodies? Like, and how does this shape trauma? And just all the things basically. This is like the most intimidating module for me to create. Like I've done a few workshops where I've explored this stuff with comrades, but it's such a like vast terrain of discussion and theories and life experiences that it's very hard to condensed, and it's also something that needs to be like discussed. I don't want to like talk at people about it, if that makes sense. I'm going to be including like lots of like journal prompts and questions, and like I'm hoping like collectives might work through the course together so they can like have like much broader conversations about these topics. Okay, module 2, herbal foundations. In this module, we will look at important herbal safety information, ways to work with plants, such as medicine making, foraging, journaling, and more, and the many incredible medicinal actions that plants have. We introduce a framework for looking at constitutions, tissue states, and energetics. We also look at the role of plants and the essential foundations for health: sleep, movement, digestion, and nutrition. So some of the lessons of this module include starting or deepening your journey with plants, herbal safety, understanding herbal actions, constituents, tissue states, and energetics, and essential foundations for health. Yeah, and I think this is like a really fantastic foundation. I've really enjoyed working on this module for people that are kind of like new to herbalism, but also like people that, you know, maybe have quite a long-term journey with plants already. And it's about kind of like seeing where you are and like looking at that in yourself and where you want to go. And I think a lot of the kind of energetics stuff will be like very interesting for people, because I don't think like kind of contemporary uni courses, for example, in the UK, like have that approach. So yeah, I'm hoping it will be interesting for people. Okay, module 3, how trauma shapes the body. There are 8 billion people on this planet and 8 billion ways people experience and process trauma, because we are all unique. Our bodies express distress in multiple ways, which are different for all of us. This module explores common trauma symptoms and how trauma can impact our bodies, from triggers and flashbacks to autoimmune conditions and chronic inflammation. Lessons include how trauma shapes the body, how the body expresses distress, trauma, chronic illness, and inflammation. And in this module, like I've really tried to just kind of like create a bit of like a pattern language for PTSD symptoms, you know, like chronic disconnectedness or hyperarousal and reactivity or sleep disturbances. Like I do feel like there are like distinct patterns which come up in a PTSD context, which, you know, I then kind of like bleed into the herbalism section. So we're looking at plants like specifically indicated for these different states, if that makes sense. But yeah, this module is kind of, I guess it's like the more depressing module of like, hey, look, there's all these studies on how childhood trauma like leads to all these diseases. But yeah, the next module is kind of trying to like counteract that a bit. So module 4 is called How Can We Shape It Back? So in this module, we take a deep dive into understanding nervous system physiology. We look at different frameworks for describing states of being, such as polyvagal theory, which is a framework on how the autonomic nervous system has evolved to keep us safe and alive. We introduce the roles of plant medicines in shifting how we feel and explore some of the goals we can aspire to in healing and feeling differently. So yeah, like I said, like I think like module 3 is like a little bit depressing, and I think module 4 is more kind of like, hey, like we've got fucking agency here, like we've got autonomy, like what are all the things we can do to take care of ourselves, take care of each other. So yeah, it's like getting a bit more geeky as well. So the nervous system deep dive is really looking in depth at different nervous system states, like nerve cells, myelin sheath, like, you know, the brain, like there's lots of kind of like more sciencey stuff. And then the polyvagal theory is a kind of like overlay with that of, what does that mean in practice? Like, how does the autonomic nervous system relate to the world? So we look at different nervous system states, such as, you know, like fight or flight or freeze or shut down, and safe and social. And yeah, like the healing goals lesson is really looking at what are our kind of like aims for ourselves. So like, you know, one of our aims could be that we want to be in like safe and social more than we are, or we want to reduce our nightmares, or, you know, whatever is our like specific challenges that we have with PTSD, like they might translate to our kind of healing goals. But then also looking at healing goals in a context of like anti-oppression. So for me, it's like prison is like this massive trigger, and doing prisoner support is like really fucking difficult and triggering. Like every single day I'm being reminded of like the worst 2 years of my life and huge amounts of kind of like violence and self-harm and yeah, just like horror. So like one of my healing goals is like, actually I really want to like abolish the prison system, you know, or like I want communities with collective care and mutual aid and harm reduction, like, you know. So yeah, it's just kind of looking again at like the personal and the political around healing goals. Okay, module 5 is looking at collective responses to traumatic stress. So this module introduces a framework exploring radical responses to traumatic stress. We look at the many individual and collective practices that can aid trauma recovery. Plant medicines are one tool in the toolbox. In this module, we look at their role in each of these necessary stages to help explore the diverse role of plant medicines in trauma recovery. Like for this module, what I'm trying to kind of like get at is that like, you know, plants are like absolutely incredible, but like they are just like one tool in the toolbox, and we need like all the other things, you know, like we need to have like safe and social time where we're spending time with other people and, you know, feeling relaxed, or, you know, maybe it's dancing, maybe it's like brain spotting or EDMR. Like there's just so many amazing tools out there, and how do they kind of like fit together in a framework? So I've actually kind of like developed a framework which I've called the Radical Trauma Response Framework, and it's got different stages. So like release, rest and renew, reconnect and resistance. I'm not going to go into them now, but they're kind of like different stages which aren't necessarily linear, but they're like common ways that things we need to get through traumatic experiences or to recover from PTSD or like chronic stress. So it's like, how do we release that nervous system energy, for example? Okay, so I will give one little example, but say, for example, trigger warning here, with Taylor, one of my close friends, killing themselves in prison last year. It was like the release stage was like all about, you know, like just fucking screaming, just like rage and anger and pain, and making sure that that was like moving out of my body and releasing. And I was ranting and raving and starting arguments with everyone and getting it all out. And then that was kind of followed by this like desperate need to like rest and recover and kind of like rebuild my reserves by being quite isolated, to be honest. And, you know, like taking various like nervines and herbs that can help me and my nervous system like recover. And then the reconnect is like how, you know, how do we come back into the world basically, like, and, you know, how do we access support from others and reconnect with ourselves and reconnect with plants and people. And then the resistance is like, how does this feed like into kind of like ongoing struggle? So like, you know, it's also healing for me to like work on this inquest, right? Or, you know, write statements about what happened or support other prisoner families from people who've died in prison. Like, you know, part of like, there's no point in just like recovering from something if, you know, we need to like change and transform the things that are traumatizing us, you know. Like I wish there was just as much attention on that as there was on kind of like internalized individualist solutions. So anyway, so we look at that in more depth. Can you see why I've been a busy bee? It's like really a lot talking about it, but it's making me feel really good about having created this. I've kind of like struggled with some like, once I launched the page, like just some weird like imposter syndrome stuff of like, oh my god, da 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 da. But I think that's just like standard response if you're like been socialized as a femme who's kind of told they're a piece of shit. So it's like, yeah, how to access that confidence and support, and my friends have been amazing in that way. Okay, so module 6, we finally get into like the deep stuff around the herbs. So this is the Nervines deep dive. We begin our series of lessons taking a deep dive into nervines, plant medicines that have an affinity with the nervous system. We introduce herbs that enable our body to feel calmer and grounded, prepare us for sleep, and allow us to move into a more parasympathetic, aka rest and digest state. We also look at nervine tonics, herbs which act to tonify, strengthen, and restore the proper structure and function of the nervous system. They are a key tool in enduring and recovering from traumatic stress. And some of the lessons include introducing these herbs, looking at relaxants, and looking at nervine tonics in this module. So yeah, this is like really, yeah, it's like the pleasurable bit, if that makes sense. Like we're really looking at the plants like as kind of persons, you know, like with their own personalities and their own uniqueness. And what I'm doing is I'm like overlaying like the nervine properties with polyvagal theory and also with this kind of like PTSD framework that I've developed. So, you know, instead of just like, oh, this herb calms you down, it's like, okay, actually this herb helps you move into safe and social. Like it's uplifting. Whereas other herbs have like a more sedative effect of you're hyper aroused, you're anxious, you're having a panic attack, and they will help like cool you down, if that makes sense. And I think the aim of these modules is to like really get specific, you know, like really understand like herbs in practice and their particular qualities and affinities. And when we look at the kind of like chronic illness and inflammation section, like I'll introduce kind of like different like axes of, you know, the way our bodies express distress. So for some people, it might be like kind of like insulin resistance, like metabolic pathway. For other people, it might be like a musculoskeletal pathway. For other people, it might be like digestive distress. And so we're trying to like pair our nervines with like those kind of like fault lines, if that makes sense. Like, so for me, like I have a lot of like heat and tension. So I need things that are cooling and I need things that are relaxing. And if I take warming or stimulating herbs, then I'm in trouble, you know, then I'm getting not aroused in that way, but like I'm getting like aroused, like I'm potentially getting anxious, I'm potentially getting heart palpitations with lots of plants. So yeah, we're just kind of like looking at the specifics. And the nervine tonic section is like really, really important because we're also looking at like herbs that can offer some like symptomatic relief, like making you feel better in that moment, but also like, you know, like long term, like reducing the sensitivity of the system, or like literally helping with nerve repair and kind of increasing our sort of like tolerance. So yeah, I think the nervine tonic section is really important. And, you know, when we look at the very last module, we look at, you know, bringing all this stuff together into like formulas and things. And, you know, it might be that we're looking at something that offers like acute, direct symptomatic relief, but we're also looking at, you know, what does my body need long term, or what do I need to prevent potentially, like what's the trajectory of my like fault line. Anyway, sorry, I am rambling. Okay, so module 7 is like the kind of second nervines deep dive, part 2. So in this module, we will explore some of the more hypnotic and sedative herbs that can help to induce a stronger relaxant effect and a deep and healing state of sleep. We also take a deep dive into cardiac nervines that have an affinity with the heart and cardiovascular system. And finally, we cautiously explore stimulating nervines that can be indicated in some cases which have a direct stimulatory effect on the nervous system. So in this section, like I think a lot of people like throw these plants around like, oh, you need like California poppy for stress. And actually it's like that herb for someone might make them feel like incredibly dissociated and unsafe because that nervous system state of being kind of like sedated is like extremely triggering and re-traumatizing for them. So again, we're going to be looking at like the deep dive specifics about these plants and yeah, when they may be appropriate, when they might not be, like what are some of the strategies, like maybe it's like drop dosing, maybe it's combining it in a formula, like, you know, there's like loads of different strategies. And you know, for some people they really need like a strong sedative, like they're on a pathway potentially from coming off other strong sedative medication, for example. So, and yeah, the cardiac nervine stuff's like really epic. You know, we're looking at all the classics like yarrow and hawthorn, and you know, in all of these modules, like I'm not just talking about like alleviating symptoms, it's also about like preventing further kind of dis-ease in our body. And the stimulating nervines bit is also like an important piece, right? Because we all have different nervous system states. Like some people may feel like incredibly shut down, and you know, this is a thing we'll talk about in the polyvagal section, but it might be that, you know, they need a bit of oomph, they need a bit of warmth, they need a bit of kind of, yeah, like heat and movement in order to feel more kind of safe and social. So yeah, that's like another important part. And then the last module is module 8, which is all about practically working with plants. So this module introduces many of the incredible ways we can make medicine with plants, with how-to guides on tincture, glycerite and infused oil making. You will learn how to harvest herbs and make potent medicine for yourself safely, effectively and sustainably. This module we will also explore case studies of how plant medicines have supported people with PTSD and traumatic stress in their lives, so that you can have a clearer idea of effective ways to support yourself with plant medicines over time. You will make an implementation plan for yourself and identify clear next steps to put the program into practice. Okay, so if you know me, like my close friends or, you know, people I've like worked with for a long time, you know that like I am like so practical as a person. Like I am not like an academic, like I'm not into like concepts, like I'm very, very like earthy, and like I'm also very practical herbalist. So for me, I'm like really passionate about like how do we get these medicine making skills like in practice, like how can we actually build like autonomy. But I think there is like a whole other world of herbalism that opens up when you are like in the do-it-yourself mindset, when you're making your own medicine, when you're learning how to, you know, make ointments, balms, like that stuff's just like so much fun and it's so healing. And that's a big part of the course. Is like it's not just about which herb you ingest. It's like integrating herbalism into your life. And I'm so like geeky with this stuff, but we're going to have a little kind of like PDF workbook about an implementation plan for you of, which plants you want to work with, what are your next steps, different parts of the program and how you can put it into practice and stuff. And there's like fact sheets with kind of like how-to guides on different things, like the glycerite making, how to make your own tinctures, how to make an infused oil with lavender. So yeah, and then the case studies is like things from like people from my practice, but also like different examples of like different constitutions, different presentations of PTSD or traumatic stress in different people and how like different approaches have worked, Yeah, so the case studies are like quite interesting. And yeah, I think for clinical herbalists that are taking the course, like maybe you'll find stuff that's like of value there. Because I definitely, like for me with my journey with PTSD, like I definitely took all the wrong things, like taking like very strong adaptogens and having like massive fits of rage and PTSD episodes being triggered by certain plants because they were so stimulating for me, thinking that they were like nourishing nerve tonics or something, like, and it's all about looking at like what's best for you and your body and your constitution and your fault lines and trajectories with your health and and just like how to navigate this like overwhelming amount of information. Whew! All right, so that's like the modules, and then there's a little bit of text saying, begin your journey with plant medicines, be the first to know when the course is launched. People who join the course waiting list in advance will receive a course discount. So if you sign up, I'm going to be sending you a few emails with little discount codes to encourage you to enroll. So yeah, please join the waiting list. And there's a section on self-guided zero stress learning. So this is a little bit about how the course is presented. So I've put 0 time stress, complete at your own pace for as long as you need, lifetime access. And that's really important for me because I've done plenty of courses where I haven't been able to keep up with other people because of like shit going on in my life. And just like the sensation of time pressure is often just like, not what people need. I know like a lot of people love structure and deadlines, but I think for people with PTSD or traumatic shit going on, like I think we need as much like spaciousness as possible. 0 achievement pressure, no assignments, quizzes, grading or essays, study for pleasure. Oh, and I know this one is difficult. Me and my friend Kesota have talked about this, of doing online courses and just chasing that little percentage bar of like, yay, I've completed the lesson. But I definitely don't want people to take that approach with this course. I want people to kind of like study it at ease. I don't want them to feel pressure about submitting assignments. And I also, don't have the resources to like enable that much like mentoring or supervision or feedback, if that makes sense. Okay, 0 disclosure pressure. So no triggering group calls with strangers discussing deeply sensitive life experiences. So for me, like this is really important. I think it's hard enough facilitating like a in real life like course with people, let alone something online where kind of like there isn't the trust or the existing relationship in order to make people feel safe. And then when people are not feeling safe, there's much more like potential for harm. And I just like, again, like I don't have the capacity to like facilitate group calls or like invest in, giving emotional attention to loads of people. Like it's just not possible. And I also like from feedback from talking to people, like people don't want it. Like I really didn't go to things like online in the pandemic because it's just not my style. Like I know I like blather on about my life on the podcast, but in terms of like, specific traumatic experiences I've had, especially childhood stuff, it's not going public. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not sharing that stuff on a podcast. I talk about prison. I really care about fighting the prison system and everything else, but there's other things that it's a no-go, so I wanted to create an environment where people don't feel this pressure to have like an emotional commitment to anyone else, like people are going through enough like to go on a call and have to listen to other people's stuff. Like I didn't feel like it was going to be liberating for this particular program. For other courses, like hell yeah, I love collectivity, I love group learning environments, like I'm not, I push back on individualism, but yeah, for this course, I just want it to be nourishing and, like pleasurable for people. And I know the content is going to be triggering and difficult for a lot of people, but I also just want it to feel like, this little sanctuary, like, oh, it's a Wednesday night. I get to like, do a couple of lessons on this course, or, like I want it to like offer people that little bit of like, pleasure time, if that makes sense. Okay, no exhausting information overwhelm. No forums, messages, or overwhelming information to keep up with. Study when you have the headspace, energy, and desire. Like literally, like I can't face another Slack group or another WhatsApp group or another email list. And I don't think people who are struggling with PTSD should either. So I've tried to make it as like light as possible, if that makes sense. Freedom for your learning style, beautiful, highly visual presentations, the ability to download lessons as audio files for when you're on the move, or just, when you want to listen, you don't want to watch. Practical exercises, journal prompts, and action steps. Resource lists for each module so you can check the references and deep dive into source material as much as you wish. I get so irate in courses where people are like quoting things as facts and they haven't linked to like research or like where they've got that knowledge from or like the teachers they've had. Like in the course, I've got like quite a big section where I'm just like thanking everyone that I've learned from. It's a whole lot of people and a lot of herbalists. And if I do quote like clinical studies, which I do, I always put like the links in there for people to check it out. And yeah, for me, like I'm dyslexic and I love like visual presentations, so that's like my style, but I know it's also makes the learning experience like more pleasurable for other people, so I've tried to make everything look as nice as I can. And I've also got lots of memes, because memes like perfectly communicate concepts and things really quickly. So yeah, if you like memes, you'll enjoy the course. Okay, flexible access to content, freedom to chop and change between lessons, study in the order you want, following your interests and passions. So, if you're a really experienced herbalist and you just want to like do the trauma stuff, you can just, like revise that stuff. If you, are like really experienced with like trauma language, but you don't know anything about herbs, you can like chop and change. All I ask is that people read the herbal safety stuff and watch that lesson before doing anything relating to the content, because it's important. But otherwise, like people can chop around. Like you don't have to watch like 50 videos you're not interested in before getting to the bit that you are, if that makes sense. How much does the course cost? So there's 3 columns on the page. I'm just going to read through them. So there's the solidarity price. So this is like pay what you can, including nothing if needed. And how this works on the kind of like payment button is like, I'm going to give you a code which makes the course free. And then you're able to just kind of like specify the donation that you want to give at the checkout. And if you can't afford a donation, that is also okay. If you can't afford it right now, but in 2 months' time, you're going to like pop some in like my PayPal, that is like awesome too. Like I grew up like on income support. Like I have lived on benefits. Like I have, I hate this whole like, if you really care about it, you'll find the money. Like it's just not real. Like I think, yeah, maybe feel like an alien sometimes like in the herbal world, but yeah, this for me is like really, really important. Okay, so solidarity price. So I've listed just a few different options for maybe people's different contexts. So refugees, asylum seekers, and people without papers, former prisoners and detainees, low-income prisoner and detainee family members, low-income organisers experiencing state repression, and anyone in financial distress unable to meet their basic needs. And then the standard price, which is $195, and again, there'll be a discount code if you sign up for the waiting list, or there's options to spread it over 3 months, so it's £65 like over 3 months, or £39 over 5 months. So this is for people in employment or who have like a steady income of some kind, like maybe they live in a different country where they get actually quite a lot of benefits every month. Definitely not the case in England. It's for people who are able to meet their basic needs and afford extras like holidays or takeaways, and for people with some savings and safety net. And then there's like a resource price. So this is $345. So this is for people with access to unearned generational wealth like trust funds, family allowances, living off inheritance. For people who own a house or own more than one property or they're a landlord, and for people with larger than average savings, pensions and investments beyond your daily cost of living, and for people who are middle to high earner in terms of work or wage labour. So why a sliding scale? I've written, my sliding scale involves 3 different packages aimed at people with different levels of financial resources, as well as people affected by different forms of systemic oppression. You can read through the packages above in more detail. In short, people on low incomes pay less and financially resourced people pay more. It's an imperfect way to create more economically liberating model while we work to create different economic systems. Class is complex. It is inseparable from other forms of oppression, racism, sexism, transphobia, ableism, etc. People do not fit into neat categories or into neat sliding scales. Capitalist society generates and perpetuates a feeling of scarcity. For many, this is acutely real, like for people living in poverty. For others, it is an emotional feeling of instability and fear, which is also very real. Studies have shown that even millionaires feel that they do not have enough. Therefore, a sliding scale is a bit more complicated because of our different relationships with money. Hence why it is important to integrate an analysis of systemic oppression and class rather than an emotional feeling of what you can afford. When you enroll in the course, there will be different payment options at checkout, including the ability to spread payments across 3 or 5 months. There will also be an option to check out just offering a donation of what you can afford, including nothing. Please note, as part of my anti-capitalist principles, no one is turned away for lack of funds. Thank you for caring about liberation. Yeah, and, maybe everyone who signed up for the waiting list, won't give me a dime, and I'll have to kind of eat my words here. But, I do think people will hopefully pay, the standard rate if they can, and if not, they will pay what they can. I know people know that I grew up on income support with a single mum, and that kind of class experience has really defined who I am. And I have huge access to privilege in loads of ways, like stable housing, living with my mum and stepdad, and having access to land through them, not through my mum or myself in terms of economic power, but there's definitely a huge amount of social capital and resources there. But in terms of money, I'm definitely really struggling, and I hope that people will also reflect on, hey, Nicole's worked really hard on this, and I also want to support her, and kind of the surplus generated will be going towards enabling me to do the Solidarity Apothecary full time, enabling me to make and distribute medicine, to do trainings, to have more offerings for people on low incomes, to go to Calais and do the clinic, maybe going to Ukraine or Poland, or doing work on the border with Poland and Belarus. I've just got such a long wish list of ways that I want to work with the Solidarity Apothecary. So I'm really hoping that this course can help make all of that stuff happen. Okay, sorry, this is a much longer episode than I was expecting. Okay, so then the next section is about Nicole and the Solidarity Apothecary. I'm a clinical herbalist and anarchist organiser based in the West Country of England, in Somerset, south of Bristol. My lineages are English, Welsh and Irish. I have been studying herbal medicine informally for over 15 years. I completed a 4-year clinical training with the Plant Medicine School in Ireland to develop my skills as a practitioner. As a herbalist, I focus on supporting people experiencing state violence, most of whom live with debilitating PTSD or are surviving ongoing traumatic stress. For better or worse, prison has shaped my adult life. I've been supporting partners, friends and comrades in prison for the last 18 years. I did a 3.5-year sentence myself after a huge wave of state repression against a campaign to close down Europe's largest animal testing company. Plants sustained me through my sentence, and many years later I wrote the Prisoner's Herbal Book, which is now distributed to prisoners worldwide. I'm also the author of the book Overcoming Burnout, that links recovery from burnout with wider systemic forces such as classism, sexism, poverty, chronic illness, ableism and power dynamics in groups. It focuses on models of collective care and mutual aid. Why do I do this work? In 2016, I got sick, really sick. My life became a blur of NHS appointments, fear and confusion. Accessing the work of other healthcare practitioners, such as herbalists, was a constant financial struggle that delayed my recovery. When I did see them, it often felt so alienating as a working class person who had been brought up by a single mum. It felt like people couldn't comprehend the things I've been through, including state repression, abuse and sexual violence, poverty and incarceration. It felt like we were on different planets. It took me a long time to learn and gain an understanding of how traumatic stress truly shapes our bodies and how to navigate my complex PTSD diagnosis. As I developed my practice, I kept wishing I had an online resource that I could refer people to that could help them understand the distress they were experiencing and how it is possible to feel differently. I believe people deserve to access the knowledge themselves about their bodies, about plant medicines, about how to make medicine, so I created this course. Plants have kept me alive. I know they can support you too. And there's a gorgeous picture of California poppy. Okay, please hang in there because this is a very important section now. So there's a section called What This Course Is and Isn't. As someone who has lived with PTSD, I've had those moments of absolute despair where I'm prepared to spend everything I have in order to feel some kind of relief. Where I've gone into debt investing in online programs, rapid therapies, or whatever is on offer because I'm literally so fucking desperate to feel different. It would break my heart to know that people paid for this program under any kind of false premises, so I wanted to make it explicit what this course can and cannot offer. It's the worst of capitalist marketing tactics when online courses and coaches promise the world for only ... and dollar signs there. I'm not prepared to exploit, deceive, or manipulate anyone. This program is not the single solution. You're not going to work through videos and suddenly be free from PTSD. As we explore in the course, our bodies are unique. We experience distress in different ways, and it can often take a whole ecosystem of support to feel differently. For example, therapy, dietary changes, herbal support, embodied practices, friendships, political organising, etc. This course is not a replacement for therapy or any other trauma recovery modality or approach. Likewise, this course does not offer you a qualification that enables you to work as a herbalist or trauma professional, but it will certainly complement any course of study that you are undertaking. I share this knowledge within my scope of practice, a clinical herbalist. I'm not a therapist. I've not had the financial resources to complete lengthy qualifications in trauma recovery, but I have undertaken thousands of hours of self-education in trying to understand how trauma shapes the body. Through the course, I give detailed references and links to resources from trauma professionals with many letters after their names. My knowledge is learned and embodied through life experience, in the trenches, so to speak. In prison, I worked as a listener with the Samaritans. This involves spending sometimes 30 or more hours a week listening to suicidal and deeply distressed women disclose horrific stories. I've supported people in prison for nearly 20 years, pushed to the limits of what humans can endure. I've worked with thousands of refugees in a mobile herbal clinic and supported many people fleeing the invasion of Ukraine with herbal medicine. I've supported people experiencing repression and gifted medicine to their families destroyed by grief. I've worked with people trying to heal from prison, addiction, and childhood trauma with herbal medicines to reclaim their sleep, find out what rest really means, and slowly learn to inhabit what feels like a new body. I've seen plants work their magic over and over and over again, and it's with this confidence that I feel able to offer this course. So what does this course offer? This course is an opportunity to increase and deepen your knowledge of plant medicines. It is an opportunity to transform the way you look at trauma. I believe plants can and do radically change people's lives, and can more often than not bring them into a world of pleasure and purpose, connection and healing. I know that herbs have direct effects on people's bodies and have been used on every continent for thousands of years. In the words of Indigenous writer and scientist Robin Wall Kimmerer, in some native languages, the term for plants translates to those who take care of us. Plants take care of each other and their ecosystems, including taking care of us. They take care of us in prison courtyards and refugee camps, when fleeing war zones, or working towards a world free of domination, exploitation and oppression. Plants take care of us until all are free. I hope they can take care of you too. Whew! And then finally there's like a whole section on commonly asked questions, which I'm not going to read now. But yeah, I'm just going to say that I'll put the link in the show notes. Please sign up for the waiting list if you're interested and to get that discount code. And please share it with people who you think it may help. Yeah, this is like, I feel like it's like I'm giving birth to something, you know, like it's such a big deal to me. Like these are areas of struggle that I've had for so many years, and it's taken me so long to find respite and to understand what's happening in my body and how to work with plants. And yeah, I just know that herbs are incredible, and I know they can support people, and I know what it's like to live in this prison of traumatic stress and PTSD and chronic nightmares and hyperarousal and irritability and anger. Like I spent so many years like in that dominant state that just harmed me and people I loved. And yeah, I feel like I finally got out of it, and I finally found the tools and the language and the understanding to feel differently in my body. And you know, there's definitely no like cure. Like I still get triggered, I still get into moments of distress, I still have nightmares like occasionally, but things are very different, and I'm able to do all this work and organising and helping people and holding space for people in a clinic, and I never thought that stuff was possible for me. And yeah, I just want to say, like, again, no one turned away from lack of funds. Like, please sign up if you're interested, please spread the word, and yeah, thank you for listening to this very long episode. Speak to you soon. Thanks so much for listening to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. You can find the transcript, the links, all the resources from the show at solidarityApothecary.org/podcast.